Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Our next guest says, in today's world, the word friendship is casually tossed around. In fact, too casually. In his new book, he uses Jesus' model of choosing the 12 disciples as an example of the importance of impactful relationships. Years of ministry, leadership, and personal experience have convinced him there is no such thing as a casual relationship. He gives readers an action plan for getting smart about every relationship, from friendships to work teams to marriage to ministry contacts. Our time is too short and our life purpose is too great to take relationships lightly. His practical approach enhances anyone's ability to relate to the message of relational intelligence and make clear what could be avoided if we apply what Jesus, the creator of relationships, has to say. And then the most important factor is to follow his lead. Dr. Dharius Daneils is the founder and lead pastor of Change Church, a vibrant, diverse congregation. With a doctorate in ministry from Fuller Theological, Dr. Daneils speaks to national audiences. He lives with his wife, Shamika, and their 2 sons in New Jersey. You can follow him at Dharius, and that's Dharius, Daniels.com. Joining us now to talk about his new book, Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want, is Dr. Dharius Daneils. Dharius, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Dharius, you have touched on something that I think is a gold mine. We, out of seminary, we don't teach boundaries and understanding of hierarchy of relationships, both on the personal, ministerially, community, none of that. We talk about hermeneutics and homiletics and exegesis and, crafting the message. And so many come out and in this theocracy that we're supposed to be operating in, it's not a theocracy at all. There's a board, there's the people that are, they're loyal to you, but not to the vision. Or they're loyal to the vision, but not to you. And finding those that are loyal to the vision and to the person takes a very unique set of skills to discern. And when we look at that model, we find out that that also applies to every aspect of our life, is that there is often a split in divided loyalties, and we call them friends, but the definition of friend is much deeper in the kingdom than it is in the natural. And you drive that point home eloquently in this book. Before we dig into relational intelligence, I kind of want to go on a little journey back to little Dharius. Right, to what your experiences were, what your model was, the role models, the faith models. When did your faith become your own and not grandma's and not mom and dad's? And what was that turning point for you? And how did that impact you to get to this point where you could now reflect backwards, which is based on your experiences in ministry, in life, in determining that this is not casual, but is actually under the divine authority of God, and understanding why he puts people in your life, how we are supposed to relate to them, and where you got those skills. But they all start going way, way back to the first church you ever attended, and that was the church of the nursery at home.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm from a small town called Kilmichael, Mississippi. The last census said it was filled with 630 people.
Mm.
not 630,000, 630 people. One police officer, no stoplights, one town doctor. So it was a real small, small knit town and small community. And I'm telling you, um, I grew up in a pastor's home, but one of the great things that my dad did is my dad led me on a journey to discovery, but he did not attempt to force feed his faith down my throat. It was a number of different things that he did. He encouraged me to read, to explore, etc. And but I'm going to tell you something that I remember probably, I don't know, I may have been 9 or 10 years old at this point. I remember an aunt who I was really close to, who lived right up the street from me. Um, she actually gave me my name. I remember her having this incredible relationship. So I thought with her husband, but at some point the relationship got volatile and he actually took her life. And I remember what I felt as a young kid. I remember my father explaining that to me. And I remember watching him outside the pulpit take collect calls from my aunt's husband who was in prison for taking her life. And I would watch him as a kid coach and counsel and comfort the man who killed his own sister. So the
Mm.
message my dad lived spoke much louder than any message that he ever preached. And I believe I became more convinced about the power of my faith through what I saw him live, not just the sermons I heard him preach.
Darius, you bring up the single biggest point as to why uh, millennials and people are walking away from the church is because they're seeing people act in a manner which is not in concert with the perfect reflection of Messiah. And that snippet right there of that story of you watching your father be, not tell, not preach, but be the man of God, that in the face of the one who took his sister's life, that he would set his own pain, his own loss aside, and walk in that, forgive him, Lord, for he knows not what he does. That is exactly what we're supposed to emulate. And that is the magnet that we're supposed to be, the flame we're drawn to like a moth. So you saw this example and it inspired you.
Mhm.
What did you do with that inspiration?
The first thing I did was, it was weird. I was only, like I said, probably 9 or 10 years old, but it gave me, I remember getting this weird, probably, I guess, sense of curiosity, um, that wanted me to explore this faith and make it my own. So back in those days, we had Sunday school, um, vacation Bible school. And so it went from being something that I just went to something that I went to for the purpose of learning, growing, exploring, something that to me had become very real. It was very real, even at that young age, because I remember being hurt and angry and mad and enraged. And I saw my father, I saw the grace that he handled this man with. And it became so real to me that I knew that it was something I wanted to learn more about. So I began to take my faith seriously. And it was probably about that, around that age, I even started reading my Bible
Mm.
on my own. Up to the point that through my teenage years, I was an athlete and I played basketball. I would have, when we would go on games, I would have my gym clothes in my backpack and my Bible in my backpack because I was convinced of the realness of this faith, based on the example that I saw in my father. And that kind of really set me on this path of, I would say, exploration and pursuit of my own relationship with God. And I remember, you know, even going back to those days, obviously the relationship has evolved, but I remember cultivating a healthy relationship with God during that season of my life.
You know, a PK, pastor's kid, can go one of two directions. They can grab a hold of the faith, feel the calling early on in life, and being given that opportunity and having that confirmation from dad, who's a pastor, and confirming the call. Or those that go out and step into the world, experience the world, drift, and then at some point find their way back, or as many times it happens, they don't, and they take another route. There's a distinct difference between a vocational pastor, someone who, that's my job, and someone who is called to the ministry. And you can tell by the message they preach whether or not it is a calling or it's a job. When did you hear the call?
19 years old. 19 years old. This is what's weird. I think my dad started sensing it about 15 or 16. So I remember one day he walked into my room and he said, "Hey, man," he said, "I noticed you've been really, really reading your Bible a lot." And he said, there was a significant shift in my spiritual appetite at the beginning stages of my call to ministry. He said, if you ever feel like you're feeling any of that or you want to talk through some of that with me, come see me and let me know. That was at 15. I felt no connection with what he said at that point. I didn't feel that at all. But yeah, at 19, really 18, 19, I can remember being in my dorm rooms in college, just really wanting to share with people, having a passion for sharing with people the experience, the transformative experience that I had had as a result of my relationship with God. And I began to see organically people kind of gather to listen or to come to me for advice. Then I began to sense that this is the way in which I was supposed to use my life. Now, it took some time for me to accept and to submit to full-time ministry, but I was 19 years old when I recognized and accepted the call of God on my life to ministry.
So important that we know the difference between a calling and between a career path.
Mm-hmm.
Because one is from the heart, the other is just a career choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's apparent that you began living the faith modeled by your dad and stepping into that role independent of him. And such credit to him for opening a door but not taking you by the hand and pulling you through it.
Mm.
Because there's those that feel, I have to do this. I'm being forced into this. But he was gentle and obviously quite understanding that the nurturing that you needed to come from the admonition of the Lord, and he just needed to be a vessel of someone that you could bounce ideas off of. In your college years, did you play ball?
Yes, sir. Play basketball.
Okay. You had a playbook.
I did.
You had to memorize that playbook. You had to know what the signals were and where you were supposed to be and what your place was. Your relationship with your teammates, did they become your friends? Did they remain as the common bond between you was sports? Or was there a combination of the both, and did you begin to see relationships develop? What I'm trying to do here is take a look at where the concept of relationship began to form in you, because this is something that God plants and then marinates until something like this comes out of you. And as we look at each one of the pieces of the puzzle as they come together, then we get the whole picture. So
Sure.
there were obviously players on the team that had aspirations of being discovered. They had family members pushing them in a particular direction, coaches pushing them in a different direction. And there's a distinct difference between those that are driven to an NBA kind of career and those that grab a hold of the world. There are those that grab a hold of the Lord, and there's those that grab a hold of both. Where did you fit in that paradigm?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of the question, I would say I learned a lot about relationships. I didn't even know I was learning so much about relationships. I learned so much about relationships by playing on the team. I learned a lot about motives, and things that I'm just now discovering that I learned when I was in that season. Um, and this is what I mean when I say I learned a lot about motives. I did not have NBA aspirations. I knew I wasn't that good. So when I came onto the team, my plan was to go to law school. I wanted to play and I wanted to win and I wanted to enjoy myself. But there were others who had different aspirations and different motives. And some of them may have wanted a career path after a career in sports after college. Others may not have wanted a career in sports after college. They were just more concerned with them playing well than the team doing well. So I soon discovered that just because someone is on the same team doesn't mean you're actually teammates. Doesn't mean that they have your best interests at heart. Doesn't always mean they have the best interests of the team at heart. Sometimes it actually means that the team is simply an avenue for them to live out their own personal desires and ambitions and wishes. And I could tell that by people's response when we won and when we lost. Because there are some people, if we won but they didn't play well, they weren't happy. If we won and they didn't play much, they weren't happy. And there were others where if we lost and they played well or played much, they were happy. So I learned a lot about relational dynamics there and having to navigate those worlds because you don't get to pick your teammates. And some of them not only had different motives, some of them had different morals. And so you're right. I kind of found myself in the middle, and I didn't know, even in that season, God was teaching me the reality of relationships, the reality of people, and the importance of intelligently navigating that landscape if I was going to succeed and have a pleasant and positive experience playing sports.
In any team environment, any business environment, there is leadership. And the leadership model is sometimes good, sometimes bad. I remember a coach I had at one time, all he ever did was yell at us. And so that was just his style. He yelled at everybody. I was a sensitive young man. I took it personally. I grew up with a father that yelled at me. Now I had a coach that yelled at me. And so I just thought that it must have been me because there was some consistency in that. And as I grew and matured, I realized that it had nothing to do with me whatsoever. That's that self-centered, worth, and at the core, we're the sun and everything revolves around us, and that's just not the case. But what I did learn that everybody has currency. Everybody has a currency. My dog's currency is belly rubs. Okay, she'll do anything I tell her to do if she knows a belly rub will come. It doesn't matter what it is, whether or not it's to not run out the front door, whether or not, whatever it is, if I say to stop, she'll immediately stop. And when she stops, she flips over on her back because if she obeys, she knows she's going to get a bet. That's her currency. Okay. My daughter has a currency. I learned her currency when she was very little. And every relationship, there is kind of a currency involved in that relationship. And it's not that people can be bought and sold. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what motivates them in relationship. You're married. Shamika has a currency. It might be movie night. It might be date night. It might be flowers. It might, you know exactly what it is that brings a smile to her face every time you say it or do it. All right?
Sure.
And she knows that about you.
Right.
All right? You learn your children and you find out. So relationship dynamics are really more three-dimensional than we tend to understand. And in your book, Relational Intelligence, you explore this concept of relationship. What prompted you in your life? What experience, what happened to you to cause you to examine? A lot of times, good judgment's learned through bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
One of God's great tools is that our breakthrough, our blessing is on the other side of breakthrough. It's only when an obstacle comes our way and we overcome the obstacle, we find out what it was and why we went through it. Mm-hmm. We don't know it at the time. But you've come out the other side of something to be able to then take a backwards look to what the key component parts were that led you to it. So what was the driving experience or the impetus for you to examine this exquisite approach to understanding relational intelligence?
Yeah, I didn't have one specific experience, but I hit one season in my life where I realized that personally and pastorally, in my own personal life and trends I saw in pastoral ministry, that people's, for the most part, greatest joy and greatest pain was coming from the same place, relationships. I saw that. I saw the height of ecstasy at a wedding, and then I saw some of the low of lows at a divorce. I saw joy, people full of joy during the birth of a loved one, and then I've seen people filled with grief during the loss of a loved one. So I experienced that reality in my own life, and I began to see those same trends, directly or indirectly, in the lives of so many people I was serving as a pastor. And I saw that this pain, this joy, this progress, this regression was all in the lives, for the most part, of people who were followers of Jesus. Sincere, engaging in spiritual disciplines, faithful in attending church, serving. Yet at the same time, I saw that intelligence doesn't always transfer from one area to another. And I felt like, okay, simply being sincere, simply being committed to spiritual disciplines and serving a local church is not enough if we're going to manage this area of our life well. We need to be intentional in exploring the scriptures to see how they speak to this key and critical area of our life. And I saw that there was no area of a person's life that was not directly or indirectly impacted by relationships. Spiritually, emotionally, professionally, financially, you name it. It was all impacted by relationships. And I said, you cannot get life right if you're getting this part wrong. I don't even think you can be a good Christian, a faithful Christian without it, because you can't carry out the great commandment without getting relationships right.
It's so important. As we look at relationships, communications being a critical issue to every relationship, beginning with God. And unless we are in constant dialogue, in prayer, in fasting, in worship, and building on that relationship, that open line of communication, to drive towards what you call purpose partners. It begins with what purpose does God have for your life, and how do you partner with God as a purpose partner? And then it comes down to how do you partner with your wife as a purpose partner in your home, as you minister in your home. Then you take it out to your family extended, to your local community, to your church community, and then to the world at large. And it all stems from this relational intelligence. And I want to make sure our audience does not confuse this for common sense, because this doesn't have to do with common sense. This has to do with intelligence. Yes. And that's something that we tend to measure in IQ, or we tend to measure in our ability to reason or to logic. But this is a different kind of intelligence. This is one that we can develop, we can hone, we can begin to realize, and you make the statement, and it's unequivocal, that there is no such thing as a casual relationship, that there is purpose in God's economy for every single person that crosses your path, whether for a moment or for a lifetime. They play a part in the master plan that God has for you. We're talking with Dr. Dharius Daneils, author of a new book called Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want. No man is an island. None of us can be isolated, completely withdrawn, pulled back just because of circumstance. And if we do that, then we deny God the power to heal, to restore, to prune, to bring new growth, to bear fruit for the kingdom, and to serve our fellow man, and to esteem another more than ourselves. We have been called to this ministry of reconciliation. That requires people interaction. But understanding the dynamics of those relationships is critical to developing a relational intelligence. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to break this down from a model that Jesus set in place for how he applied relational intelligence in the selection of the 12 and how it applies to you in your life. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. And we're talking with Dr. Dharius Daneils, author of a new book called Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want. Dharius, welcome back to the program.
Absolutely. So glad to be back. Having a blast.
I'm having a great time with you as well. You are a delightful guest. You make a profound statement, and that is you've come to realize in your years of experience in retrospect, as you examine and take inventory of your life, that there really isn't such thing as a casual relationship, casual friendship, that there are categories, there are degrees of closeness, degrees of trust, degrees of relationship. That we must discern as to whether or not we're going to invest to take it to the next level, from acquaintance to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. How did you come about this understanding and be able to articulate it in a manner that relates directly back to the model that Jesus created? As you say, he is the author of friendship, of relationship. Where's the genesis of that for you?
Well, it really starts from, as I mentioned earlier, that season of my life where I had this epiphany about the importance of relationships and kind of the deficit when it came to spiritual resources on how to navigate non-romantic relationships. So when I had this epiphany about the significance of them, I started looking for material just to kind of fill my own personal well. And most of it was on marriage or parenting. There was not a lot out there on this whole other area of our relational life that consumes so much of our life. So when I didn't see stuff out there, it drove me right to the Bible. And I wanted to see what the Bible had to say about relationships. But for me, I always want to start with Jesus. And I wanted to see how Jesus models for us the best way to manage them. And so I'm not quite sure what opened my eyes to this, but I just saw. And I saw the way Jesus managed relationships, specifically with the 12, with the inner circle within the 12, and with those disciples, followers, and apprentices that were outside the 12. And so I wrote down this statement. This was probably 8-9 years ago, based off of what I saw there. Jesus loved everyone biblically. That's without conditions. He valued them equally, but he treated them differently. There was a type of investment he made in the inner circle that he did not make in the remaining 9. And there was an investment that he made in all of the 12 that he did not make in the others. It was strategic investment, not because he loved them less or not because he valued some people more, but he recognized that treating everyone right does not mean that you treat everyone the same. And I saw that pattern in the life of Jesus, and that was kind of the inspiration for seeing what else do the scriptures have to say about this? And as I began to study, Proverbs and some of the words that Paul gave to the church at Corinth, I saw so much about these areas of relationships. And this is going to sound a bit, I hope it doesn't sound sacrilegious, but I saw a lot of it had to do with using our brains and not just following our heart. It's like God gave us a mind and he wants us to engage it and use it. It's a gift to us. He wants us to use it when it comes to this area of relationships. So I say our emotions and heart can be in the car, they should, but they should not always be behind the wheel when it comes to the way we manage relationships. And that was definitely the case with Jesus. That's the only way you can look at Judas, a man you've walked with for 3 years, and say, whatever you're going to do it quickly. It's because he saw and sensed and was not surprised by that coming.
Dharius, as you were talking, and we are a very spirit-filled environment here in the studio and in my life and Jason's life. As you were talking about it, it occurred to me we have a cliche called circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw concentric circles, starting with a small circle in the center and building like the ripple of the water, concentric circles. The epicenter of that circle is the closest of the close. That is where the energy springs from. That is the core. And then we have concentric circles outside of that, all relationally, but at various degrees. So when you get to the outermost circle, those are people you talk to every 10 years, old high school buddy you run into. But as you get closer into the center of those concentric circles, the dynamics change, and you can move. People can move from the fifth circle to the third circle, from the third circle to the second circle, from the second circle to the first circle. There's this life dynamic, but that cliche, a circle of friends, really does apply, and applies right here as we look about, all right, how do I analyze? Who do I have in that inner circle? Who do I have in that next layer? And what qualifies them to be there? Because I have to qualify. Because it's a commitment on my part to invest in how I treat this circle versus this circle versus this circle versus this circle. So that's this picture that the Lord has given me from what you're saying in this idea of circle of friends. How does that resonate with you? Does that translate a lot of the content of the book in how I examine how Jesus had 12 in the center, but right there at the center, at the bullseye, were 3?
Yes. Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think that is the heart of the book. That's the essence of the book. And I think you spoke about something that was so profound. And it's really something that stuck out to me as I was, preparing this work. And that is asking yourself the question, what qualifies someone for certain circles? And there are believers who really, some who gave me a little pushback in this area because they interpret that as judgment, as opposed to, Jesus would call it discernment. And Jesus says, we know trees by the fruit that they bear. And I think asking that question, that criteria question, is so important because it is an exercise in fruit inspection. What fruit is being demonstrated from the life of this person? And we're examining that fruit not for the purpose of judging the tree, good tree, bad tree, but examining that fruit for the purpose of placing the tree in the right circle so that we know what to expect from it because when you understand the nature of a thing, its behavior becomes predictable. And also so that we know how to invest in it. You've got limited time, limited energy, and you want to make sure that when it comes to the investments you're making in relationships, that the people that mean the most to you are not getting the least from you. And without those circles, that's not possible.
Is it is friendship a form of discipleship? That as I invest in that friendship, I'm actually grooming and discipling them to help them become more relevant, more fruit-bearing, more important to the vision and to the lives of those they impact? Is friendship really, in a way, an aspect of discipleship? But in discipleship, there's not a personal. There's a kingdom connection, but not always a personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
I might disciple you in my office, but I'm not going out to dinner with you and your wife.
Right. Sure.
Do they touch upon each other? Do they intersect each other? Is one a form of another? Because I can see where Jesus had a lot of disciples. Remember, we talk about the 12, but when he sent them out, he sent 70 of them out, 2 by 2. So how do we get from 12 to 70?
Yeah.
There's 58 added to it, and all of a sudden they appear and they're going out 2 by 2. And you go, well, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
You know, what were the names of the 58?
Yeah.
I don't know. So as we look at this dynamic, there are categories of relationships that you identify in the book. What are some of those categories, and how do we respond differently to each one? How do we gather intelligence, apply intelligence, and develop a better friendship quotient or friendship IQ, FIQ?
Yeah. It's great. So there are 4 categories, 4 circles in the book. So one is the friendship category, and you mentioned that in the context of discipleship. So obviously, every discipling relationship isn't a friendship. There may be a spirit of friendship, a degree of congeniality that exists, but every discipling relationship is not a friendship. But I think friendships are probably the most consequential discipling relationships. And this is the reason that I say that. I say that because a person is only going to, not only, but for the most part, people are going to be the most transparent, the most honest among friends. So friends then have an opportunity to see and to speak into areas that the average person you're in relationship won't. So I feel like that relationship is so key and so critical, because friends are going to get the real you, and they're going to have the most opportunity to speak into what they see. So friendship is one category. Associates, or what some would call acquaintances, that's the other category. And the third category is assignments, which I would call mentees, or people that you've got a primary discipling relationship with, meaning that discipling is the primary reason you're in relationship and the primary nature of that relationship. It's kind of what you mentioned earlier. I'll disciple you in my office, but we aren't going out to dinner together with you and your wife. And and then also advisors. And these would be mentors, people who are in your life, mentoring, coaching, and discipling you. And so I feel like in the book, we lay out the importance of, okay, let's define these categories. First of all, these circles. Then let's discern. When you look at the relationships you have in your life, as we've defined these categories, Do you have people in categories they don't belong in? Because if you do, you're expecting something from them that you probably aren't going to get. And you're giving something to them that may be bad stewardship on your part because you may be casting pearls before swine. For an example, if you have a mentee that's not hungry for growth and that's not teachable, then you may have that person in a category they don't belong in. So for me, that's one of the ways you kind of gather the information that you need for the purpose of relational intelligence. And this realigning that you may have to do is actually acting in a way that's relationally intelligent with those people who are in the circles of your life.
You know, the in ministry, uh, we sometimes feel like we have to keep people at an arm's length. A lot of times our board members are people that may even not be a part of the congregation, that they are outside spiritual parents to us, or I know in my uh, peer group of heads of seminaries and distinguished people in first century Judaism, which is my expertise, and prophecy, that kind of who makes up our board here for our ministry. And they are friends, they are confidants, they are ones that I can pick up the phone and call and tell them of a personal crisis or even a questioning of something we've discussed before that I don't agree with them on. And we leave great latitude for the fact that if the Bible doesn't state it clearly, then there's no right or wrong. We'll both find out at the same time when it comes to pass. And we like that space. There's a lot of margin in those relationships. I find that the more margin that I have in a relationship, the closer the friend is, as opposed to the dogmatic relationships where there is that barrier of separation where I have to be the authoritarian and I have to adjudicate. I can't really be friends with them, but there's also a little bit of a downside, and that is that there's a pattern of ministry that after my years, I've noticed that sometimes when you help people through a very difficult situation and you get to see the man behind the curtain, that fear sometimes sets in and they view you now as somebody that harbors some knowledge that's quite intimate, that they begin to question, well, wait, he now knows all of my dirt, all of my secrets, all of this. And you having the integrity of pastoral privilege and would never repeat it to anyone, including even your wife, that this is in the confines, would never breach that. They become fearful, and sometimes they turn that in the form of anger or rebellion or seeds of discord because they become fearful. And that then moves them from, there's the concentric moving to the center, but there's also the concentric moving where you have to discern whether or not they're moving toward the outer rings as opposed to everybody progressing with the same degree towards enhancing the level of friendship. There has to be the ability to discern who I need to pull and move to an outer circle.
Right.
That requires this relational intelligence. This is what I love about the book, is that the skills you need to apply are contained in here into how to discern friendships, associations, thought leaders, mentors, and people in your life that are various degrees. We like to think of the body of all of us being one, in one accord. That experience that brings the unity to the body. But people are still people. And we, being in our own worlds, in our own ministries, being the center, and the concentric circles are around us in the community, we have to constantly assess
Yeah.
where and how. And that takes some discernment, but it also, if I know you, I know what your spiritual gifts are. And I'm in error if I take your gift of hospitality and stick you in the back room counting the offering when you flourish being at the front door to greet. You'll be a much closer friend if I tap into your spiritual gift and help you find fulfillment both in service and relationship versus a need that I have.
Right.
And that's a balance. And that's a balance whether you're in ministry or not in ministry, is finding what role an individual plays relationally in your life, both in the positive and the negative.
I agree 100%.
So as we navigate through the book, reflection, you say, is one of the most essential aspects. We cannot take for granted any of the people that are in our life. And you talk about the role reflection plays in relationship. We just have about a minute left, so kind of pull this together for us as to what the challenge is in being able to capture relational intelligence and apply it to our lives. What benefit will we derive from it, both kingdom and personally?
Yeah. So I think as it relates to the kingdom, it's your purpose in some way or another is going to impact people. God is all about people, and this skill is key and critical for carrying out the great commandment, but also your personal calling. That's one. And then personally, your ability to carry out your purpose is not just going to be determined by who you are and what you have. It's going to be equally impacted by who you're with, who's in your life, and how you manage those relationships. And this is why I feel like this work is so key and so critical to our lives as followers of Jesus.
We've been talking with Dr. Dharius Daneils. You can find him at Dharius, that's Dharius, Daniels.com. The book is called Relational Intelligence, the people skills you need for the life of purpose you want. Dharius is absolutely correct that books on friendship, relationships, usually tend towards the romantic, the marriage, the family dynamic, parenting, and the like. But when we look at our lives and we take inventory, it's more apparent at a funeral than it is in midlife as to who are really your friends. Maybe it's time for us to move out of that funeral environment to start looking today at our relationships, what we've invested, what we need to invest, how we can become better at being for that other person as to where we fit on their circle, as well as we assess where they fit in ours. And if they are in conflict with each other, we need to examine that. And if we want it to grow, both have to invest in it.
That's right.
Outstanding work. I highly recommend it. Visit ignitinganation.com. Look at today's program lineup. You're going to see Dharius' name. Click on it. It's going to take you a link to buy this book. Dharius, thank you. Thank you for opening up our eyes, our audience eyes, to a new dimension of understanding about relationships that we had not pursued before.
Thank you so much.
God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.